Won't dry off, keeps flowing.
Won't dry off, keeps flowing. Won't dry off, keeps flowing. Won't dry off, keeps flowing.
Hello and welcome to my Close It again. Existential there, or there is, there are. Well, there will be, there must be, there has been, or there have been, and so on and so forth, yeah? Well, it's a structure that most of you will probably think wouldn't constitute any major problems to a competent user of English that I'm sure you are. But it's Mr. Krzyżanowski that we are dealing with here, so yeah, he can combine those with some really advanced structures, and he's capable of turning them into a lethal weapon, believe me. Right, so actually in his book, at page 221, he provides only 5 examples of different advanced structures used in combination with the and to be. But comparing these to the 6 examples that I'm going to present today that I fished out of 4 different Olympics papers, it'll be plain to see that these are very similar. And if you invest some time in these, yeah, you're likely to be able to score more points next time you come across an Olympics paper. So let's take a look at the first one of those. This is test F, if I'm not mistaken, that we're dealing with here. So paraphrasing is what we have to do, and we have to work around the pieces of the final sentence that have been provided for you. Yeah, if you could just take a piece of paper and a pen and pause the recording, I'd be a really happy chappy, but if you don't do that, just wait for the right answers. President Fox welcomed the elimination of nearly all racist chants from the stadium and said he wished there had been none. So what you need to know to be able to cope with this problem is that wished has to be combined with the past perfect tense, obviously, but you also have to kind of guess that Mr. Krzyżanowski wanted you to use the plus be, okay, and combine these two estimations, so to say. So there had been none. Okay, so the next 5 examples are taken out of section E, which is all about partial translations. So once again, we've got some fragments of the goal sentence provided, and we've got some gaps, and we've got a Polish version of a sentence. And very often you will have some ideas of how to translate the sentence. If it was just blank space provided, you'd be able to cope with a problem without many problems. But then you take a look at what you've got in front of you and you think, nah, but I can't do that. Yeah. And Mr. Krzyżanowski has got another idea of how to translate a sentence, and you have to try and, well, find out what his way of thinking was. So, mogły być jakieś wcześniejsze nieporozumienia, które doprowadziły do kłótni. Tego nie wiemy. There may have been, or could have been, or might have been some earlier misunderstandings that led to the row. Yes, row, because this is the way to pronounce kłótnia. A row of seeds, but a huge family row. Okay, so maybe there would be something that's generally acceptable in English. It sounds all right, doesn't it? But it's just not old school enough. It's not natural enough for Mr. Krzyżanowski to accept. So just go with a modal verb whenever there's a suggestion of modality of speculation. So I'm not sure, well, use may, might, could. I'm sure, use must or can't or couldn't. I'm criticizing something, use should or shouldn't, and so on, rather than some alternative structures. Okay. W Ameryce nadal wydaje się istnieć mur oddzielający od siebie rasy. In America, there still seems to exist a wall separating the races. There still seems to exist. Now, why is it or might it be problematic? Well, mainly because many people, many Polish users or speakers of English won't realize that in that there are structure, be can be replaced with exist, for example, and a few other verbs. So, yeah, he wants you to use exist, or just use exist if you know how to do that, right? There still seems to exist, or possibly there still appears to exist. Yeah, the next one is slightly harder. So this photographer requires a clause in his contracts stating that, and here's our problem, there are to be no other photographers shooting the wedding while he is. There are to be no other photographers, or there aren't to be any, possibly, as well. But the first one sounds by far the best. So why don't you go with that? Now, again, I suppose I know what you're thinking. A lot of you have thought of there aren't supposed to be any photographers, which once again is not bad English, but it's just not good enough for Mr. Krzyżanowski. I mean, yeah, many of you will just think, oh, but why? I mean, Mr. Krzyżanowski actually says in the commentary to every single Olympics paper key that whoever is checking your work should use their common sense and accept anything that is correct English. So ideally, your teacher would just accept an answer like that while checking your work. But do you really trust your teacher that much? You've got an answer key and the test is really difficult. Well, sometimes I don't even know whether to accept something. So yeah, just go with the answers that are in the key, and there are to be no and so on is actually something, one of the 5 examples that you can find in the book. So yeah, that's Mr. Krzyżanowski kind of thinking. And the next example is exactly the same thing. So, choć w tym roku miało nie być na kampusie fajerwerków. So, although there were to be no fireworks at the campus, a few were set off. There were to be no. Not there were supposed to be no fireworks, or there weren't supposed to be any fireworks. There were to be no fireworks. That's the ideal answer if you're coping with, or you're struggling with the Olympiad. Okay, a few were set off incidentally is an example of a passive voice, obviously, and with an irregular verb here, set, but I'm sure you've known that. And the final example, which is by far the hardest one, but also illustrated in the book. Yeah, I'm using my wrong finger. Sorry about that. It's unintentional. So, using these statistics, it's easy to debunk the myth of there not being enough money for the promotion of solar energy. There not being. So, we've got of here. Yeah, of course it'd be easier if there were no of. Like the myth that there is not enough money, that would be cool, but that's exactly what I've said before. Or I've talked about before. Mr. Krzyżanowski has got a different idea, and he guides you towards his own idea in his own way. So of something, yeah, you will agree that a noun is expected here. But on the other hand, we're talking about the existence of something. So there are springs to mind, yeah, of the not being is a kosher solution here. And it's proper English. It's old school. Old school it might be, but it's proper. That's Mr. Krzyżanowski kind of English, right? So why don't you learn this? Well, take a look at page 221 here. It's one of those 5 examples. And okay, my films cannot be any longer than 15 minutes because I'm non-commercial. So I hope we still have time for me to present you with some other problems. Take a look at these 6 sentences, and once again, ideally, pause the recording, solve them by yourself, and play back the rest of the recording, in which I'm gonna just comment on those. So, translations that Mr. Krzyżanowski would definitely approve would be, there was a boy and 3 girls in the sandpit. I'm sure you understand. There were 3 girls and a boy, or there was a boy and 3 girls. It's the first noun that decides was or were, is or are. There doesn't seem to be too much time left. Okay, well, it doesn't seem that there is too much time left. It's kind of okay, but again, not something that the man would appreciate. There haven't been any problems so far. Pretty obvious, I hope. Present perfect tense with so far, yeah? There will be a huge row, again, quite easy, when Monica comes. There may have been, or might have been, or could have been an accident. Maybe there was an accident, is something that I wouldn't recommend, even though it's correct. As presented in one of the previous examples. If there hadn't been problems with availability, you would have bought those radiators. So there's a clear suggestion of the past that we're talking about here. So the so-called third conditional should be used. And 7 more examples. Okay, and my suggested answers. There would be more volunteers if there was free lunch, or there would have been more volunteers if there had been free lunch. Okay, so why 2 such different answers? Well, because there is no clear indication whether the past, the future, or the present is something that we're talking about here. So either of those will go. So the second conditional or the third conditional indeed. Now, Mr. Krzyżanowski has got some really strong opinions of conditionals, but I will talk about it in a different video. So I'm calling them the so-called second or third conditional, just to please the man in case he's watching. There must be a place on earth where life is better. There can't have been only 25 people there. Yeah, it's impossible that there were. Not recommended. Yeah, there can't have been, or couldn't have been. That's the way to think. There doesn't seem to be any point in this. Now, again, the first thing that springs to mind would probably be it doesn't seem to make any sense. Yeah, but it's said on the screen that you are supposed to use the, and this is exactly what the man does. He just expects you to use certain forms, and he suggests them in a certain way. And yeah, now here the possibility is just this. There doesn't seem to be any point. There was believed to be a flu epidemic. There are to be twice as many contestants as the last time, and there are said to have been fewer candidates than before. Now, there was believed to be a flu epidemic, and there are said to have been fewer candidates than before. Could be replaced with it's believed that there was a flu epidemic, or it is said that there were fewer candidates than before. Possibly, but once again, have a look here. Now, if I were to explain how to use these particular structures with to be, I would need another 15 minutes, so maybe in another video if anyone should ask me to do so. And 2 short comments to be ending up with. 2 razy więcej niż is twice as many as, or twice as much as, well, depending on whether a noun is countable or not. Not twice more than. And fewer candidates, not less candidates, because candidates are countable, and it's fewer, and the fewest, not little, less, and the least, that you should be using that with. Okay? And why am I mentioning it? Well, just because Mr. Krzyżanowski likes to include this kind of things in his papers too. Okay? Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you next week, hopefully. Bye.